So today we're going to talk about foundations, more about diagnosis, a little bit about repair, but we're going to talk about soil foundation interactions because basically these are mostly soil problems, okay? So we're going to talk about two parts. The first part is why is this needed? Why is this subject important and how does it relate to you guys? And the second part is kind of more of, okay, how, like, what do you do? How does it work? How should somebody be thinking about these things? And what I'll do is I'll stop for questions at the end of part one. We can talk about whys and all that. And then at the end of part two, we can talk about questions for the hows. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about data gathering. Why is it and why is it needed? And why is my screen doing that? Okay. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the 15 fallacies of foundation repair. Why is there so many fallacies about foundation repair? Well, there's a lot of money in the business and a lot of competition. And so, salesmen will be salesmen. They're going to engage in funky tactics in order to make a sale. So we're going to expose some of that and explain what the problems with this is and how it affects you guys. All right. So the first fallacy is dirt is dirt. A lot of people think that it's just one contiguous mass of Jordan. Sorry, guys, I got to silence my phone. It's not a contiguous solid mass. It's generally deposited in layers, but not completely in layers. There's earth shifting movements, earthquakes, landslides, lots of geological forces that happen over hundreds of thousands of years that change how the layering is deposited. It's not all just one smooth layer. You get fat in areas and skinny in some, and some things are more reactionary to water, clays and things. They different mineral contents. They conduct water differently between the various layers. They do various things, and so it can be very complicated. You can have lots of different things going on one site all at the same time. It's not a simple subject. That's why we have geotechnical engineers to help us understand this. They understand the geology of a neighborhood. They understand how it was deposited, what forces were acting on it. They do lots of borings to verify that. Lots of things. It's not a simple subject. Okay, so the next part is all cracks mean that foundation repair is needed. So this particular slide, we'll come back to it later on, but this is a tilt and deflection calculation that basically uses the PTI method of determining, okay, what is the severity? Okay, so why is that important? Well, I'll tell you why. Because what happens is you get a foundation repair salesman, and by the way, how are these salesmen paid? They're paid on a 100% commission basis, okay? So like, what's their motivation? Well, their motivation is to sell an $80,000 job. That's what their motivation is. So they're sitting across the table from little old lady, and she says, well, how bad is it, And he says, oh, it's on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say, Mrs. Jones, you're at an 8.5. And I'm thinking, really? 8.5? Well, like, what scale is that? Is that like the Richter scale of foundation repair? I've never heard of a 1 to 10. And then, by the way, how did you arrive at 8.5? Oh, well, based on my years of experience and the fact that my kids need braces, this is the kind of subjectivity that goes on in this world. And so there needs to be ways, engineering ways, allowables to objectively determine, okay, does this thing pass or fail? And that's what this chart does, and we'll come back to it at a later date. So number three, all foundation problems are about settlement. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on. And I'm sorry, I'm going to move fast. It's going to be like drinking through a fire hose, but not all problems are settlement. This particular illustration is about clay heave, where clays get wet and they swell and they push up. And so if you look over here on the right, you'll see a pier, at $2,500 each. Those are absolutely doing you no good whatsoever in this scenario because the edge hasn't moved. The middle has gone up and created all these problems. And by the way, they look just like the same as if the edge were going down, only it's not. So again, it's not all about settlement. Okay. Just a quick note, homeowners insurance coverage. Most homeowners insurance does not cover these kinds of things. The industry has what they call an earth movement exclusion, which basically says if the damage on a house is caused from earth movement, we exclude it, and they get away with that. The insurance industry has lobbied the various states and got them all to agree to allow them to put this exclusion, which is kind of a ripoff, but it is what it is, right? Now, if you can prove that something happened as a result of a pipe leak or something like that, and you know what the levels were prior to the leak, and you can show that after the leak it did all this movement around, you might get it covered. I've actually succeeded in getting claims like that covered on my rental houses. So can be done, but it's very difficult. All right, here's a good one. Who's a qualified design specialist? That's a fancy name that these foundation repair salesmen give themselves. They call themselves design specialists. And are they qualified? The short answer is no. And I can go into this later on and talk to you about their qualifications, but they don't have any engineering degrees. They don't even have any engineering experience. Their experience is taught to them in a 1 or 2 day seminar by their supplier that teaches them to recognize problems through the lens of what their supplier has for a solution, as opposed to an engineer. And they have different personality types. You guys know, I mean, most home inspectors are very detail oriented, right? Kind of like engineers in that respect. Foundation repair salesmen differ greatly, and you'll see the disc chart on the right here, where that talks about personality types. Foundation repair salesmen are high D, high I, whereas most home inspectors and engineers are going to be higher C and higher S. They're going to be more conscientious. They're going to be more looking into details, all that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. So they're not qualified design specialists, and don't let anybody fool you into thinking that they are. They're not. I've had many of them work for me over the years, and they're not. All right. The free analysis you get from foundation repair companies is a bargain. Not. Okay. The people say to me all the time, well, hey, it's free. I mean, you can't beat free, right? Well, yeah, you can, because what you get with free is you get an $80,000 repair job, because what they're not doing isn't real analysis. They're doing a sales job dressed up to look like analysis. And that's the problem. I tell people, if you were really sick with a real serious illness, would you pay good money to go to a doctor, or would you go for free to a pharmaceutical rep? Well, I've yet to hear somebody say, oh, I'll go for free to a pharmaceutical rep. Really? I don't think so. All right. Permits offer no assurance of that they're doing the right thing. Now, that may sound shocking, but it's the truth. It's the truth. They don't. The only thing that cities require, cities and jurisdictions, is a spacing plan, a spacing calculation. What's a spacing calculation? A spacing calculation is basically an engineer's calculation that says the piers are not too far apart, so it won't droop between. I mean, it's not a very difficult calculation. I think a monkey could do it. But really, you could have piers that are on the wrong side of the house. You could have piers that are too many or too little, or you may not even need any piers at all. At $2,500 a piece, that could be $80,000, and it may not even need piers. The permitting process does nothing to correct for that. They don't check for any of that kind of stuff because the engineer that does the spacing calculation doesn't do any kind of oversight on the previous process. Now, let me explain that. You'll hear foundation repair salespeople say to homeowners, "Oh, don't worry, Mr. Jones. When we pull a permit, our engineer, he's going to check everything and make sure it's all good." Not true. Absolutely not true. And how do I know that? Well, aside from owning an engineering company, the fact of the matter is engineers cannot opine or make recommendations based on other people's data. It has to be either their data or somebody who works under their direct control, an employee. And if they take data from another company and use it, it's called rubber stamping, and they can lose their license. So they cannot comment. They cannot check it to make sure it's good. They can't do anything regarding that previous data. Now, if you say to them, "Hey, check this spacing plan to make sure it's good." "Oh, okay, no problem. I can do that." And they can. But that doesn't really help you. I mean, if you've got the wrong plan, it's a really groovy plan. The spacing is great, but it's on the wrong side of the house. It doesn't really help you that much, does it? No, it doesn't. Okay. All engineers are qualified. I'll just skip over this real quick, but most everybody likes to call a structural engineer. Wrong guy's to call. You need to call a geotechnical engineer. And the reason is because these are soil problems. The foundation movement is a function of what's happening with the soil underneath it. So if you ask a structural engineer, "Well, hey, is this going to continue to move?" He's going to say, "I don't know. You got to talk to a geotechnical engineer." And almost always, by the way, the structural engineer is going to say, "Oh yeah, it's not structurally efficient." I mean, I've seen almost no houses, I think I've seen two in 40 years that kind of approach the level of structural deficiency. Okay. It's very, very uncommon. It's all about serviceability. All right, that's a whole nother subject. Lifetime warranties. Yeah, one of my favorite subjects. So, the foundation repair companies love to tell people, "Okay, we're going to give you a lifetime warranty, man. Your house is going to be good forever." Well, guess what? There are more holes in that contract for those warranties. You could drive a Mack truck through any one of those holes. I'll just give you one example, one out of many, many examples. Okay. Mr. Jones calls the foundation repair company 5 years after they install his piers. "Hey guys, you need to come out and honor your warranty. We got all cracks all happening in the house again, and all these damages are all over the place." So what does the foundation repair company do? They send out their most experienced guy, and he says, "Oh, hey, Mr. Jones, these cracks are from the soil heaving up, and it says right here in our contract that piers can't stop heaving, and so we can't be responsible for it. So, like, have a nice life." So then the homeowner, if he's smart, he'll say, "Wait. If it's all heave, then didn't you diagnose it wrong in the first place?" And the contractor says, "Hey, what do we know? We're not engineers. We're just stupid contractors. See ya." And at that point, you're out. Now, more than likely, what he's going to say is, "Oh yeah, you got a new problem on this part of the house that we can fix it. If you spend another $25,000, we can make your house perform a lot better." It's just an upsell job, like everything else. Okay. That's one out of many, many, many possibilities. Getting them to honor a warranty and do it is almost nil. Okay, state licensing boards, they're almost helpless. They, so you have your house is all cracked up and you call the registrar of contractors out. And I know in Texas, they don't have one of these. I get that. But in a lot of states, they do. Most states, they do, right? You call them out and the contractor shows up and says, "Oh, hey, look, our peers are performing just fine. But, it's a design problem." Immediately, the contractors board says, "Oh, we don't, we don't, we don't do anything with design problems. We only govern uh, workmanship issues. So, well, I guess we're out of here." Then if you call the state licensing technical boards and say, "Hey, this guy designed this thing wrong," and the state technical advisory board is going to say, "We have no jurisdiction over contractors. We only regulate home inspectors and engineers." So it results in what I call the design donut hole. There's no oversight at all on these plans that get designed by these salesmen that really don't have any idea what they're doing in the first place. All right, we're getting close to the end of part one. Speaking of oversight, foundation repair sales reps. Do they have any oversight? No. The answer is no. If you're an engineer, you have oversight from the technical boards. Or if you're home inspectors, a lot of them in Arizona, they have oversight from the technical boards. If you're a foundation repair salesman, the only oversight you have really is your boss. And what is your boss concerned about? Your boss is concerned that you need to make more sales. That's basically what the oversight consists of. Are you selling enough? If you're not, most of those guys make $200,000 or $300,000 a year. And if you're not making at least $100,000 a year, they're going to kick you to the curb. You're not selling enough because it's a 10% commission. So you can kind of do the math there. All right. Winning claims. So then the next thing you're thinking is, well, I mean, if these guys aren't going to behave in an ethical manner, we're just going to sue them, right? Good luck, because it's very hard to win. First of all, they're very well funded. A lot of them are being bought up by private equity companies, and they know all the experts. Unless you get really lucky with an attorney that really knows this business and has a lot of good experts, and a lot of them will say, "Oh, a lot of the experts will say, I can't testify against this guy. I've already worked for his insurance company, and so I'm conflicted out." So all the good experts are already stacked against you. It's very hard to win these claims. Very hard. All right. Continued movement. Hey, Mr. Jones, you got all these cracks. Your house is going to continue moving. Is that true or not true? Anybody that makes that claim and is not a geotechnical engineer is blowing smoke. I'm just telling you the truth. The only guys that can opine on that are geotechnical engineers, preferably forensic geotechnical engineers, because they know the soils, they know what's going on, they know how the water moves through those soils, they know the geology, they know all this stuff. They're, as I said, the structural engineer will not opine. He loses license by opining about this kind of stuff. He's not going to do it. Only geotechnical engineers and foundation repair people, they like to act like they're smarter than engineers. "Oh yeah, I'm better than engineer. I've been doing this for 25 years. No, they don't. And then they're going to tell you, "Oh, well, if it's been moving, we're going to assume that it's continue moving." Uh, you can't make that assumption. City and county inspectors. Okay. Let's talk about city and county inspectors. They're going to come and inspect the project to make sure it gets built right, right? They don't have a clue. Half the time they'll show up and they'll go, "Oh, this is really cool. Can you send me some information? I'd like to learn about this." And I'm thinking, "Oh, okay, well, nice inspection job, buddy. They don't have a clue. A lot of them have given up the ghost. It's just too complicated for them. It's too specialized. So they now say to the contractor, find a special inspector. Now, first of all, that's a conflict of interest, and code actually prevents it. But everybody does it anyway. I don't know why, but they do. Theoretically, the special inspector cannot be paid for by the contractor. I mean, obvious conflict of interest, right? I mean, think about it. He's not putting the piers in right. Is he going to rock the boat and cause all kinds of trouble for the client who brings him a ton of work? No. I've seen it happen. Okay. Change orders. For those of you that come from the construction industry, you know that the giant boat is called original contract, or no, the giant boat is called change order, and the little dinghy at the back is original contract, okay? And what happens in this business is they'll come halfway through the job when everything's all dug up, and they'll come to the homeowner and say, hey, Mr. Smith, we need to add 5 piers to this project. You know, there was some things that we didn't quite, you know, they were unknown conditions, you know, unknown because the salesman didn't really understand things. And so we got to add 5 piers. And if the homeowner says, oh, I have a contract, I'm paying you for the contract. Do your job, get out of my hair. Then the foundation repair foreman on the job says, oh, Mr. Smith, if you don't agree to this, we can't give you your lifetime warranty. Oh, no, you can't do that. Okay, I'll spend another $25,000 with you. Okay. And that's what happens. They get taken advantage of. Now, most of these problems can be bypassed if the engineer is the first guy on the job, does a credible job, and oversees the job and makes sure it's done properly, and signs off with the seal at the end, says this is done per my instructions and my intent. That's a lot more beneficial than these lifetime warranty things that are not worth the toilet paper they're printed on. So the problem is, if for an engineer, you know, who makes, you know, $300,000 or $400,000 a year, for them to go out on the site, a little difficult, costly for the homeowner. So what we want to do is we want to teach and train home inspectors to be able to gather the data, not interpret anything, just gather it and give it to the engineer, who saves himself a site trip and can make sure that all the data is there in a standardized, repeatable manner that he understands, and can then opine and make recommendations. Okay, so that's part one of why this is needed. Before we move on to the how of how things are done, let's take a few questions that any of you might have. And I can't see the screens, AJ, so you'll have...
No, we got one. Preston Kincaid asked, how do home inspectors protect themselves from liability in assessing severity of foundation when this is almost always outside the scope of our SOP and almost always required to be assessed by a structural engineer?
Right, or better yet, a geotechnical engineer. Okay, so good question. So a lot of these engineers will allow the home inspector to work as a 1099 employee by the job under their insurance. I've already talked to a bunch of them, and they are willing to do this. So that's the way. And now you're working for the engineer. You're not working for yourself. I mean, your company might be working for the engineer, but as an individual basis, you're a 1099 employee. You're working directly under the auspices of the engineer. And most states are allowing that to happen because they know there's not really a conflict of interest. I mean, let's face it, there's a conflict of interest for a foundation repair salesman, right? There's really not a conflict of interest for a home inspector to gather the data. All he's doing is gathering the data, and he doesn't benefit one way or the other, which way it turns out, right? Doesn't matter to him. So there's no conflict of interest. So most state boards are agreeing to let this happen and can move forward in this direction.
And Bob, can you confirm that this is not pre-recorded?
Yeah, I can. I mean, right now we're answering live, so it is not pre-recorded.
All right, I think that's all the questions we have for right now.
Okay, great. I'm going to move on and we're going to talk about how you would do this, how you would gather the data. Now, some of these things, may or may not be gathered by the site technician, right? They might be stuff that the engineer does after the fact. Okay, so I'll try to delineate those, but even though I want to go through all 16 points, some of them may not be all that applicable to people on site gathering the data. Okay, homeowner interview. So it's kind of like when you go into the doctor's office and the nurse starts asking the questions, hey, what's your medical history? What pills are you taking? All that kind of stuff, right? That's kind of what we're doing here. Hey, Mr. Jones, have you had any pipe leaks? Uh, you know, how long have these cracks been going on? When did they start? When did they stop? All that. There's a whole checklist of questions, and we've developed those over the years. By the way, if you go to my website, Foundation Repair Secrets, and go to the blog, I have the checklist printed on that blog. All right. Know the soils. This is a NCR, National Soil Conservation Service map. And this happens to be the Phoenix area where I'm from, but they have them in most metropolitan areas. And you can actually, with a little bit of experience, find even the soil data, even if there's not a map. They pre-print these maps in a lot of areas, but you can get the data even if there's no map. Now, this is not something that the site technician would gather. This is something the engineer gathers, but you still want to know the soils. You want to know, okay, these red areas, they got a lot of clay. That could be a problem area. And so you'll want to know various things, right? You want to know what the soils are, at least a basic understanding of where you're at. In Texas, Dallas has a lot of clay, right? But it's significantly wetter than, say, Austin or San Antonio, right? This is what we call the Thornthwaite map. Now, what this is, if you look at it, it's kind of cool. University of Oregon printed this nice colored version because all the other ones are black and white, and you go cross-eyed trying to look at them. But this one's nice because it's colored. And so you can see that the darker the green, the more rainfall you get, right? And then it moves to brown and then lighter brown, and that light tan is the driest areas of all, arid climates, right? Why is that important? Well, it's important to know in an area what the historical rainfall has been. And the reason for that is because if you're in an area like Houston, where it's been wet for hundreds of thousands of years, and you build a house on top of that, it's probably not going to get any wetter underneath. It's probably going to dry out on the edges. And when it dries out, if you have clays, then you're going to have a little bit of shrinkage and a little bit of settlement on the edges, right? Now, if you're in Phoenix or Las Vegas or maybe Inland Empire of California, or maybe North and South Dakota in some areas, maybe El Paso. Nobody goes to El Paso. Uh, uh, maybe Eastern Oregon and Washington. These drier, arid climates, and even the semi-arid climates, they've been dry for a long time, right? You put a house on the edge of them, what happens is you get moisture flows. You have poor drainage, the water soaks down, and it flows to the middle of the house, to the drier soil that's under the house. And that's a different dynamic than what happens in Houston or maybe New Orleans or Florida, right? Those are different things that happen. So a good expert will know what's happening with that particular area. And the reason I know about that is because when you look at Arizona here, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but it's arid in Phoenix, but you can go up to the mountainous areas along what we call the Mogollon Rim, and it's very wet. And so it acts like areas that are not in the dry areas. So you need to know the climate of the areas. There's a bunch of pine trees around. Probably it's going to be a little wetter, right? Cactuses, not so much, right? Okay. Aerial photography. This is a good one. Why do we care about aerial photography? Okay, so aerial photography. This is really important. You want to know, okay, how does the roof drain and where does it drain to? I mean, look at this little teeny side yard here. Holy mackerel, got nowhere to go, right? Big old tree, the roots suck out the moisture. Uh, Big old grassy area where they overwater the heck out of it, right? A pool. Oh, a pool with deco drain, and the deco drain sits right across here, and on either end of it, it goes to nowhere. I can't tell you. Every one of them does that. It's like, what were you guys thinking? You got a deco drain and it goes to nowhere. Like, what good is that? I mean, how does that help you? I don't know. So it becomes an injection point. It just injects the moisture right underneath. All the water that splashes into that deco drain gathers there and goes out through the cracks and just goes underneath the house. Not good. Not good. Okay. So you want to understand these kinds of characteristics. Now, chances are the engineer is probably going to do this. Probably the site technician. I mean, you can look up a map on Google and present it and let the engineer do all the analysis, right? Give him the data, whatever. I mean, he can go onto Google if he needs to, right? All right. Know the site topography. Like if it's located on the side of a big hill, water comes down here in pools, right? That's one thing to think about. I mean, we need to know that. If you've cut, right here, chances are, well, that might mean that you might have a little bit of heave from overburdened soils that are gone, or maybe you had a fill area here and maybe it didn't get compacted good. And so, you want to kind of know these facts about the natural topography and how the house would have been built on that. Okay. Foundation types. This is a typical monolithic uniform thickness post-tension slab. I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest with you. I like post-tensioning. I think it can work great, but the monolithic uniform thickness pad has problems. There's basically no edge protection to keep moisture from getting underneath. And they put these cables, if you got a 7-inch slab, they put it right in the middle. It's called the neutral zone. Oh, I mean, that doesn't stop the slab from bending. That just holds it nice and tight. But the slab can go up and down, and it can crack on the bottom if this edge goes up, or it can crack in the middle if that edge goes down. The cable will still hold it nice and tight, but the original post-tension system had ribs, right, with cables top and bottom that would keep it from stretching either way. Now that's a good system, but these newer systems, not so much. And now they're building them here in a lot of areas, these post-tension slabs with the cable in the middle, uniform thickness at 5 inches. 5 inches. I'm thinking, oh man, it's kind of like Ford and GM. They'd rather fix all the problems and get it done right in the first place, right? All right. This is a typical, what we call a 3-pour. It's common in the kind of the southern part of the United States. You got a footing, a stem wall, and then these two are poured separately, and then the slab on the inside floats and is not connected to the stem wall. And therefore the name three pour, because it takes three pours to build it, or a conventional slab. This is very common in a lot of southern parts of the nation. A lot of areas have crawl spaces. So you have your footing and stem, but instead of a slab, you have a jack in the middle, and you have wood beams that span the proper lengths, hopefully, with the right spacing, and wood on top of it. Okay, so that's the typical foundation that you might see in a little bit farther north. Okay, and then of course, the farthest up, you're going to get basements, and I don't really talk about that too much, but we can discuss it more at a future time. So the next point is to have plans drawn to scale. Why is that important? I mean, a lot of them say not to scale. Well, let me tell you, you get a salesman out there without any real drafting experience, and he draws it up, and it's like, way out of proportion. When you go and use your topo software, it totally distorts everything crazily, and you get all kinds of interpretations of things, and I'll talk about what those are in a few minutes. So these little numbers that you see here, those are floor levels, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But you use a manometer, like a zip level, which I'm not a big fan of. The smart level I like, over a water level. And you record these elevations. Now, we've got some software available through the smart level that automatically puts these in. You just hold the staff down, it reads it, and automatically puts this number in your floor plan where you're standing. Pretty cool. It eliminates a lot of mistakes. All right. You want to know where toilets are, and you want to know where kitchen things are. You want to know where the drains go. Maybe you're going to look at, okay, sewer line comes in over here. You can kind of figure out that maybe the sewer lines would go down here. They would come over here. Then they would come down this way and maybe branch off for other appliances. Okay, well, that's really important to know. Why? Why is that important? Well, you want to know, well, first of all, moisture tends to follow those trenches. They don't get compacted as well. And so moisture follows them. But also, that's also an area for potential leaks as well. So you want to be aware of that. There's a lot of reasons, but you want to have good detailed plans to help you understand things. And you'll notice down here, see, conventional slab, block stem wall with rebar, top of footing 12 inches below grade, wood frame, trusses, shingled roof, hillside lot. Okay, that's all really, really good data that helps an engineer understand what's going on. Okay, floor elevations. Now we get to the meat of the subject here, floor elevations. You'll remember seeing those numbers that I showed earlier. You can plug that into our spatial vision software, and it prints out this topo map and colors it in so that the darker areas are down low and the lighter areas are up high. And so if you took a big giant saw and cut across there in a section view, I apologize about the lack of quality of this picture, but you'll get the idea here. What you're looking at when you do that is you'll see a relatively flat surface with one end dropping off. That's usually an indication of settlement. All right. On the other hand, if you looked at this particular case with kind of like concentric rings, like that dog in the Target mascot for Target stores, and you have a lot of damage here in the middle and no damage on the outside, it's kind of hard to kind of postulate that, oh yeah, the outside settled all perfectly evenly. Nah, that never happens. So what's a more likely interpretation? A more likely interpretation is that the middle has gone up, especially that's where all the damage is, right? Okay, and then in that case, you have this kind of looking thing, which again is middle going up, not edges going down. Okay, so floor elevations, and especially the software that comes with it, helps you understand these things so that you can make inferences, or so the engineer can make inferences. Let's put it that way. Okay. And then a lot of times, what we can do is we can look at it in a 3D view, which, for clients and things, it helps them understand that, oh, that's what that means. That's what that looks like. Look, we're really high in the middle and we're really low on this corner here. This corner might have a problem, it might be settling. Um, but I don't think these other areas are settling. I think they're just a function of this area here going up in the middle. So you don't need to spend like $100,000. Maybe you only need to spend 25,000, Well, hey, if I could save $75,000 on stuff that's not going to do me any good, that'd be a huge bonus, right? And this is what engineers can make inferences about if they get good data like this. Okay, signs of stress. Anybody ever seen anything like this? Well, this is what we call cupping. This is an interior wall, say in the middle of the house, and this is your ceiling. And these are the these are the bottom side of the trusses as they come across. And as this drywall pushes up, it can push up easier where there's no trusses, right? So you get this kind of cupping, what we call cupping look. And that's common when you have an interior heave going up. And so this kind of data is really important. And this really helps an engineer understand, okay, yeah, this is a cupping problem. And oh yeah, and it's really high in the middle and all the edges look kind of the same, or somewhat, most of the edges look pretty much the same. We've probably got a little bit of heave going on as opposed to settlement, right? Whereas, maybe you might look on doorways and you might see, okay, there's a crack in this doorway and it's at a square. I'm sure you guys have seen that probably a zillion times. Is it an interior door or an exterior door? Good point. Why is that important? Well, interior doors, they're not really part of the footing, at least on a conventional slab or even on a post-tension slab. Not really. If those interior doors move, it's a function of soil probably pushing up. Exterior doors could be either way, but at least right? It gives you some basis for understanding. Okay. Site photography. Really important to have a lot of good pictures, but you want to know where the pictures go. I mean, I've seen so many engineering reports and they have like 100 pictures in them. And it's like a little description. Oh, this is the kitchen, facing east, and I'm thinking, I don't know how to put that together. I don't understand what that means. I can't really formulate a model in my head as to what's going on based on that information. Whereas if you have a site map with the pictures numbered, picture number 5 is right here, picture number 13 is right here, picture number 43 is right here. Well, let me see what picture 43 looks like. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, I get that. I can see that red line right there. It means a crack in the wall. Yeah, I can see it's a big old crack. Oh, and this blue line, this is a crack in the ceiling. And oh, these green lines are cracks in the floor. And picture 20 is showing what that crack looks like, along with picture 19. Now you start to understand what's going on. Oh, yeah. And sometimes you might want to cycle through all the pictures and all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, picture 12. What does that look like? And then you go find picture 12. Whoa, that's a bad one. And sometimes you might just want to see, okay, I'm curious to know what this area looks like. What does that area look like? Oh, let's look at picture number 8. It's really helpful to have pictures numbered. Now, in the past, when I started doing this 30 years ago, we would just go out and take pictures and try to number them and try to, make sure that we didn't make a mistake. And half the time we're like, no, picture 9 can't be right. It's on the wrong side of the house. Oh, we got to go through all the pictures and try to get them straight again, and got off on the numbering sequence, and ton of work. But now, through a program called ArcSight, if you're standing right there and you take the picture, it numbers it and puts it in the floor plan. So super fast, eliminates a lot of problems. Okay, so much for site photography. If we're saying stresses, well, the engineer's going to say, I don't know, this house was built in 1965, but they weren't really doing trusses. I'm not sure I believe that claim. Look, you're going to want to give the confidence. Just pop your head up in the attic and take a picture. You got these plates sitting right here. It's trusses, right? Super simple, super easy, super confident building, right? So those kinds of things bring a lot of confidence when the engineers are looking at the data. Oh, and is it a post-tension foundation? Is the front porch slab, is that part of the post-tension system, or was it poured afterwards and poured separately? Well, take a picture of the edge. Is there a joint there? No, it doesn't look like a joint to me. I can't see a joint right there. Well, it's got to be poured monolithically then. So now you're telling the engineer that this is poured monolithically with the post-tension slab, but you're giving the data to show it as well. And that's just, those kinds of things, those kinds of pictures really make the engineer feel confident that he understands what's going on, because it really does affect how the slab performs and your interpretation of the data once you understand it. Okay. Age of the structure. This is one of my favorite ones. What you're looking on the left is the original floor level reading of a house, and on the right, 8 years later. 8 years. Now, usually it takes a lot longer for the middle to react to moisture. So what you're looking at on the left is these low areas in the middle of the house and high on the edges, right? Well, when you have a dry environment and you have moisture that starts on the edges and works its way towards the middle, this is how it does it. It starts out high at the edges and over time accumulates in the middle. Well, it usually takes about 20 years for this to happen. Sometimes it can happen faster, but it's important to know the age of the house. If you got a house that looks like this and it's 50 years old, there might be something else going on, other than maybe edge heave or something, right? So you want to know that data. Of course, you can always look up the stuff on Zillow and whatever, but that's probably something the engineer can do, but certainly you can confirm that with the homeowner during the interview, right? Okay, determining severity. We're back to this slide again. Now, one of the things that spatial vision software does is it calculates this automatically. So nobody has to do anything. There's no subjectivity to it at all. You either pass or you fail in tilt or deflection. It is what it is. You collect the data points and it calculates everything automatically. So if you're working for the buying agent and they go, well, is this a big deal or is it not a big deal? I mean, in the past, you're going to be saying things like, well, shit, I don't know. I mean, go find an expert, right? 2 days left in the inspection window, right? What are they going to do? You're not going to get an engineer out in 2 days. You're going to call a foundation repair company. Oh, they'd love to come out. They'll do all their little analysis for free, or maybe they'll charge like $150 or something. And they're going to go, yeah, you need $45,000 in piers. Now what happens? Well, the buyer heads for the hills. The buying agent got to start all over. Maybe he keeps the client, maybe he doesn't. The listing agent gets fired by the principal owner, who then because he can't ask him to lie. I mean, so then he goes and covers everything up and starts all over again, and hopefully nobody notices, right? Even though they're not supposed to do that. So rather than go through those games, you can now say to the buyer, well, it's not a big deal. It passed tilt and deflection, according to PTI standards, this is how they interpret it. It's not my interpretation. It's their interpretation. And you have that data available to you. All right. So that's severity. Compiling a synthesis. So this is kind of an interesting little slide here. A lot going on here, right? You see, a bunch of topo lines getting really dark down here. Maybe you got settlement, but man, you got a lot up here on the high side, and you got a lot of cracks in the slab. You got a lot of cracks in the walls here, so the walls are moving. Not a lot of cracks in these walls, so these walls aren't moving. Gee, is this end going up or is this end going down? Well, then the engineer can look at all the data. Which side has the sun? Where does the water go? What do the soils look like? Are they clay or are they not? And he's going to look at all 16 things and put it together and arrive at a supportable conclusion. And that's why it's important to have good data to make good data-driven decisions. We don't want a bunch of hyperbole, and we don't want a bunch of subjective BS going on, right? We want to help homeowners when they need it, and we don't want to cause them to spend money when they don't. I'm going to estimate that probably half the foundation work done in the United States doesn't really need to be done. That's a huge economic waste. We could put that money towards doing something a lot more productive. All right, plans and specifications. So the engineer, when it's all done, he's going to say, okay, put these piers here. In this particular case, it's a crawl space. Put these smart jacks in the crawl space. Here's a representation of the joists and how they span, with the girders going this way. And all these purple things, maybe it's an optional thing. So, one of the things that the engineers are going to try to figure out is, well, how risk averse is this client? Some people, they don't want to spend any money and they want to take all the risk. And other people are like, no, I'm going to spend a lot of money and I don't want to take any risk. So it's hard to navigate that without really knowing that person really super well. So sometimes giving them some options helps with that, right? And that's what engineers will do a lot of. Okay, just about done here. Peer review. Human beings have built heuristics to kind of help us over the last 200,000 or 300,000 years. You hear a little bit of rustling noise in the leaves behind you. You're going to look to see if there's a tiger. And you're going to run really fast if it looks anything like a tiger, right? And if you don't, you're probably going to get eaten. And you might not pass on those genes. Whereas the person who is a little bit more paranoid and looks and runs really fast, well, they survived and they passed their genes on to us. So now we're stuck with these heuristics. Only problem is there's not a lot of tigers floating around. And the work that we do nowadays can be a little slower, maybe a little methodical, but those heuristics still jump in and make us make those quick decisions. And that's what we got to fight. And the way we do that is with peer review. We're going to look at somebody else who doesn't have those same biases that we do and say, what do you think? Oh, yeah, cool. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your opinion. And then, of course, the professional seal. So that's the 16 things. What we do as a company is we provide training and certification and tools to help inspectors assist engineers in a way to help them augment their income in a way that they haven't been able to do in the past. And so I see AJ hopping on here. Looks like I'm about out of time. Maybe we got time for a couple of questions before we hit the road.
Oh yeah, we have time for questions, and you can wrap up. We do have a question from Tim before it gets buried in the comments. He asked, could a concrete footing that was not permitted to cure properly be a reason that the bricks installed on it have step crack settling up to an inch?
Probably not, although anything is possible. And the reason I say probably not is because if you've settled an inch, it's going to be a function of the soils. You know, if it doesn't cure, I mean, if concrete dries out before it cures, and concrete goes through a chemical reaction called hydrolysis. I'm a brain fart right now, but uh, uh, basically, it goes through a chemical reaction, okay, and it goes from calcium carbonate to cement. And if the water escapes, it evaporates too fast before the water can be used in hydration, well, then you might have some low strength concrete, but it's probably still going to do its job. It's still going to have good compressive strength. Most concrete is over designed. And so if it's not, and you might have cracks and you might have performance problems, but you probably won't have settlement as a result of that, unless it like just completely crushes or something, which would be really unusual, but could happen, I guess. I hope that answered it.
As we have another question from Alan. He asks, I'm a geotechnician and a geotechnical engineer, and I do some home inspections. I usually get asked to assess foundation cracks or foundation instability. Being both a CPI inspector and an engineer, I've learned to wear one hat or another during an inspection. Is this
Nice.
the right approach? I find myself refusing to assess the reason for foundation problems, only to make a light suggestion, then asking the client to have a licensed engineer to provide an assessment that is not me. If I
That
do
is
offer
exactly
this,
right.
what would be this? If I do offer this, would this be a conflict?
So no, it would not be a conflict because you're not going to be telling people what's going on. That's not your job. As a data gathering specialist, you're going to be doing just about the same thing you're doing right now, gathering the data and let the engineer opine on problems, recommendations, specifications. That's their job. We don't want to take their job. Let me tell you, uh, it takes a lot of training and a lot of experience to be a forensic geotechnical engineer. Uh, you don't want to be wading into that without the proper qualifications. But what you can do is gather the data, kind of like a nurse gathering the data for the doctor, right? And make it cheaper for the homeowner, more cost effective for him to be able to uh, pay for a good quality analysis without having to give up the freedom of getting a free analysis in exchange for a guaranteed job of spending money, whether you need it or not.
Okay, another question from Matthew who asks, have you found a cost ROI for repairing foundations that could educate our clients on?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Have you found a cost ROI for repairing foundations that could educate our clients?
A cost ROI, return on investment. Well, we're wading into the engineering area now, and it depends on whether you really need to do the work or not. And that's the engineer's job. And if a work really needs to be done, well, then it's going to be worth it to do it. You know, if the house is going to keep moving and have all kinds of problems and it's going to keep moving, it's probably not going to fall down on you or anything, but it's going to be a pain in the neck. It's going to be hard to sell. It's going to be difficult to maintain. It's going to create a lot of what we call serviceability problems. And you're going to probably want to minimize those problems if they're going to keep happening. And that's what foundation repair could do. And in cases where this is happening, it's a good use of money. I can't tell you, what the return on investment would be because every case is different.